In this video, we'll be discussing how adaptations are believed to occur in an evolutionary model. And I want to have these just refresh in our minds that, when people disagree about this topic, oftentimes they're really kind of arguing over terms. And the way that one group will use the term microevolution is that it's the change within a species, and that macroevolution, the big evolution, is actually if you get a new species. Microevolution, though, the way that someone else might define it is that microevolution can be thought of as change within a kind, which can include creating a new species. And macroevolution is really, can you show me how you can make a new kind? Like, how do you go from fish to amphibian? How do you go from amphibian to reptile, reptile to bird, reptile to mammal, etc.? So in this particular video, we'll look at certainly how species can change. We'll look at even potentially some evidence that might look at, are there ways to make new species? And then we'll look at, how do the different groups interpret that evidence. So similar to the last video where I showed you some examples of potentially how you might make a new species and get a speciation event, we'll be looking at similar stuff in this video. So microevolution, really, depending on how you define it, it essentially means evolution on a small scale. That's what we're looking at today. And there's actually lots of evidence for microevolution. We have observed it. The real issue is the word small. It's subjective. So again, there's two ways you can look at it: within a kind, or maybe even within a species. It can also be referred to as adaptation. Sometimes it's described as an adaptation. So here's an example of a microevolutionary change that we've observed. Antibiotic resistance. Bacteria, as we've used more and more antibiotics, the percentage of those bacteria that are resistant to the antibiotics has increased. And the reason why is essentially, you can leave it like artificial selection, but let's consider it kind of more of a natural selection mechanism. That you've got a population of bacteria, you treat that bacteria with an antibiotic. The antibiotic is now your selective pressure that's going to kill all of the sensitive strains of the bacteria. The ones that are more resistant, though, are going to tend to survive and reproduce better. And so you're selecting for the resistant type. So the more antibiotic we use, we're actually selecting for the ones that are resistant. We've seen beak shape change over time. We'll look at some really amazing examples of camouflage, and we'll look at some examples of mimicry in this video as well. So here's a picture that illustrates that idea of the antibiotic resistance. You've got the bacteria, which divides into all the different kinds of bacteria, some of which are carrying mutations that make them more resistant to the antibiotic. When you then dose that bacterial population with the antibiotic, it kills the weak, but the resistant are the ones that survive and thrive. Beak shape. We've seen this picture before, so looking at the different finches that Darwin encountered on the island. They've got these different beaks. The shapes of the beak appear to be shaped a lot by the actual environment and the foods that are available. So you consider that microevolution. Again, a young Earth creationist or someone that doesn't necessarily accept evolution is going to argue, okay, but yeah, that's still the same kind. Even if you could even make a new species of bird, which they may or may not acknowledge, if you could, that still would be the same kind. It's not a big difference. It's just minor differences, the shapes of beaks. Here's a picture you might see on a textbook in college. It's called Adaptive Radiation of Galapagos Finches. So what that means, adaptive radiation means, okay, the idea is simply this. You have an ancestral species of bird that gets to the islands. It's then isolated on the different islands, and it adapts to the different environments on the different islands. And so you get what's called adaptive radiation, which is where from that ancestral species, you get all of these different species. That's their argument from an evolutionary standpoint. And again, the argument is that the reason why you're getting these different species is because they're eating different kinds of foods, whether it's mostly insects or mostly seeds or cactus or bird, fruits and things like that. Now, just to kind of think about this picture from the different viewpoints. A old Earth creationist, or maybe someone that accepts evolution, is going to say, okay, yeah, that makes sense to me, that evolution is shaping these different birds over time to the different varieties. Now, young Earth creationists might disagree and say, no, these are all just different species of bird that were all created to have their different niches. And so, yeah, they're similar because they're all birds, but they're a little different because they have some of those not adaptations, but design features for eating their particular food items. Or some young Earth creationists that actually do accept rapid evolution after Darwin's flood might say, yeah, okay, fine. This ancestral species of bird got to the islands after the flood, and then yes, it evolved in all these different species of birds, but they're all still birds. They're all the same kind, so they'd still categorize that as microevolution. Camouflage is an interesting one because camouflage is something that evolution argues, is an adaptation that can happen, where if you look like the environment that you live in, then you're more likely to gain protection from predators, and so as a result, you're more likely to survive long enough to produce offspring. Now, what's interesting though is that the camouflage that we see is amazingly complex, and let me show you some pictures here. So this one, again, you can kind of argue this from either side. One is that this incredible complexity of camouflage arose over long periods of time through evolutionary mechanisms where, the ones that look the most like their background survived and thrived the best. The other is to argue, look, this camouflage is so spectacular, it was obviously intelligently designed in some mechanism, in some way, either just straight through creation or a guided process. So let's look at some really cool examples of camouflage here. There are things called pygmy seahorses. They are seahorses, but they are pygmy, they're small. And look at the incredible detail of the camouflage. Not only are they the same color as the coral they live on, but they even have the same bumps mimicking these little polyps of the coral. So look at that. I mean, if you didn't know that seahorse was right there, you'd swim right past this coral, would never see it. Beautifully camouflaged. And what's cool is the different species of coral all have their own, species of pygmy seahorses that mimic them, which is kind of cool. One quote that I wanted to throw in here, and this is actually attributed to Charles Darwin. So it's a letter that he wrote, and what he said was, the sight of a feather in a peacock's tail whenever I gaze at it makes me sick. So here's what Charles Darwin, this kind of interesting for you to think about kind of where his thought process was. So why would a peacock's feather make him sick? Well, when you look at a detail in a peacock's feather, it's truly astounding. It's beautiful, it's amazing, and his reaction to that was, wow, this looks like it's been created, like it's been designed, and that makes me sick because my theory is proposing that something that complex could have arisen through mutation and natural selection, variation and natural selection. And so he acknowledged that, wow, the natural world that we can see is incredibly complex, and it almost screams to be screaming that there was a creator, and that doesn't jive with my theory. And so here's another example of that. Here's a cool example. These are a flower mantis and a leaf mantis. So these are praying mantises that are camouflaged to be predators for the most part. So predators also use camouflage, right? These two spiders are camouflaged so that they can look like their backgrounds and ambush prey. Another example, here's a fish, beautifully camouflaged to the background, the seafloor that it lives on. Some more fish, flounders that are all very similar as far as they beautifully camouflage with their background. An octopus. This is a cool one. This is a gecko, and his skin, even his eye actually, the iris of his eye is colored to look like the lichen that grows on this tree. And it's kind of hard to tell, but if you look carefully, you'll see there's actually like a little flap of skin that they can actually push against the tree running down the side, and so they don't cast a shadow. They just sort of meld in with the tree itself. Like this is like a growth on the tree. Squirrel, right there. You see the deer? I'm assuming you see it, but do you see both deer? Right there and right there. There's the two deer. Owl. Another cool one, I like that one of the owl. Look how beautifully the colors of the feathers just camouflage nicely with the bark of the tree that's living in. There's another cool one. Looks like a dead leaf. Frogs. Obviously these frogs live in the leaf litter. And I mean, that one is really cool. Look how much like a dead leaf it looks. This one looks kind of like the mud that it's living in. Here's another one. This is a lizard that obviously lives in the leaf litter. All right, so beautifully camouflages onto the leaves. Here's another lizard that lives more up in the trees, obviously where the leaves are, the green leaves. Now here's what I want us to think about. Let's imagine how these adaptations might develop and how it could even potentially lead to speciation. Let's just kind of play this out as a thought experiment. Let's say that in this jungle on this tree, we've got the same species of lizard, but some are born and are more brown colored, and some are born and are more green colored. Well, the green ones are likely going to be living more up here, kind of blending in with the leaves. And so every generation's the ones that look the most like the leaves do the best. The brown ones tend to find themselves more on the lower part of the leaf litter. And the ones that are, the selective pressures there are very different, probably different things hunting them and different food resources. And they're, going to be blending into a very different background. So they're going to be selected for, which ones look the most like these dead leaves. And so you could imagine then that over time, what was one species of lizard now sort of becomes two separate groups. One that's living down here, one that's living up here. They're probably not going to be interacting very much, probably not mating very much. So you've got your isolation. Even just on a tree, you get isolation. And over time, these ones are acquiring different mutations, different selective pressures, changing the way they look. These ones are acquiring different ones then, changing the way they look. And ultimately, over time, the idea is you now get two species of lizards on the same tree that came from that ancestral species of lizard. This is how evolution is proposed to work, mechanisms like this. Now, what's interesting about that is that even if you accept that that could potentially happen, they're still lizards. So again, someone that doesn't believe in macroevolution where you can change kinds is still going to argue, look, fine, you got a new species of lizard if they grant that, but they're still lizards. They're still the same kind. Now, last thing we'll talk about today, which is mimicry. Mimicry is where you've got one species that actually is, usually it's one that's harmless, like the California king snake here, and it's mimicking something that is harmful, that has a bite, a sting, something like that. And so it's pretending to look like that venomous version so that it can be avoided. Because, animals and things that might want to eat a snake are going to avoid the snake because they know they might get bitten and killed. And so this guy is mimicking. Even though he's harmless, doesn't have poison or a sting, he's mimicking the one that is. And in California, we only get this one naturally. But in Florida, actually both species exist. And so there's actually, in Florida and other parts of the world where they have both, then they will teach their kids a nursery rhyme. If red touches yellow, you're a dead fellow. If red touches black, you're okay, Jack. And so it's the song that they teach these kids, or a little nursery rhyme they teach these kids so that they know if they come across these snakes, if red touches yellow, don't go near it. Very venomous, right? It'll kill a fellow. Red touches black, it's the harmless king snake, and you're okay, Jack. This is a moth, and we actually have one of these in my classroom. So next time you're in my class, you can take a look for it. And when it's perched on a tree where it's not flying around, that looks an awful lot like what? Well, like an owl. And so the things that might be interested in a moth, like a bat, will avoid this moth because it looks like an owl, which is something that preys on a bat. I like this one a lot. This is a bee, and obviously we know that bees have stings. This is a fly, like a house fly, but it's a particular kind of fly that spends a lot of times on flowers, just like bees do, and it even has some of the coloration of a bee. So you might think twice if you're somebody who might be interested in a fly, you might avoid it. Here's another one, again, one of my favorites. This is a green parrot snake that lives in the jungle, in the forest, and is kind of hanging out in the trees and snaps at birds and things that are flying by and eats them. Well, this is the rear end of a hawk moth larva. So this is the caterpillar of the hawk moth, and its rear end looks like the biting end of a snake, and so things are going to purposely avoid getting near it, birds and things that might be interested in eating a moth larva. So I hope that video was helpful, and I'll see you next time.